ES Audio.
What did we even do before quick commerce put all those mopeds on our streets and all those snacks in our cupboards? Actually, the model's been around longer than you think.
Some people think that quick commerce, as it's sometimes referred to, benefited from the pandemic, but actually people were already ordering convenience retail on kind of takeaway or takeout platforms.
Steve O'Hear is Strategy VP of Zapp, which raised around $200 million in Series B funding this year. Even Lewis Hamilton got on board. He was one of the earliest entrants to the instant grocery market, which is now booming with lots of rivals.
There was a lot of competition, and we saw that some of our competitors were offering extremely generous discounts. We never really did a tremendous amount of that, and I think that's paid off, because since some of that, that venture capital money is dried up and competitors are not throwing money at customers, we got the right kind of customers in the first place.
I'm David Marsden from the Evening Standard. We're going to be talking to Steve about instant groceries and Zapp. But Steve, who has muscular dystrophy, is also a pioneer for disabled people in business. So we'll be looking at how the remote working world has opened up new opportunities too.
One of the good things that came out of the pandemic, and there weren't many, to be clear, but it definitely removed that glass ceiling.
This is how to be a CEO. How do these instant delivery growth companies like yours actually work? Because to me, it almost feels kind of miraculous. I go on the app, hit what I need, I order something, and then it turns up 15 minutes later. How? How is this happening, Steve?
No, you're absolutely right. There's definitely a little bit more to it than that. As I always like to explain, behind your favourite bag of crisps or your favourite bottle of wine is actually a pretty complex new supply chain, right, that gets products from the direct brands we work with and the wholesale into our big giant London distribution centre, and then that goes out and replenishes each of our individual Zapp stores. I think we have around a dozen of those in London, and they're the local micro fulfillment centres where we stock our products, because we act as both the retailer and the delivery service. So we do the whole customer journey, and then from there, of course, as you rightly point out, you place your order on Zapp, and then our store associates pick the products, place them in the bags for the riders, and our own employed riders then deliver your Zapp moment on our all-electric fleet to your door in minutes, 24/7. So yeah, that's how the magic happens.
And how big is that warehouse? To risk running out of stock must be a problem. So what does it look like for you when you enter the warehouse? There must just be shelves and shelves of stock there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's 25,000 square foot. It's pretty big, but it really allows us to develop that exceptional customer experience, because by having a central distribution center, we can do what's called intraday or same day replenishment, right? So when we know a particular store is running out of your favorite products, we can replenish ourselves directly from our DC. Whereas what you often see other retailers having to do is wait for the wholesaler to do a round trip, maybe the next day or later in the week. So we decided very early on to invest in our supply chain quite deeply, including that, as you say, that giant London distribution centre.
So you guys launched, I think, 2020, which is roughly the pandemic era. It's probably not the best time to open a business, Steve, but actually with something like this, maybe it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's two ways of thinking about this. Some people perhaps misunderstand and think that speedy delivery, grocery, or quick commerce, as it's sometimes referred to, was something that, grew up in and benefited from the pandemic, and that perhaps when lockdowns ended, that kind of customer demand might reduce. But actually, what our founders at Zapp, Navid and Joe, figured out early on is that people were already ordering convenience retail on kind of takeaway or takeout platforms, right? And that would see, gig economy riders going into other people's convenience stores and hoping the products that you wanted were in stock and that you would hopefully get it within a short time span. And what they realized is that there was that pent-up demand for a more convenient way of ordering sort of drinks, snacks, and essential groceries, and even other kind of household items. But they're doing it on these takeout platforms wasn't really cutting it, right? So that was the thesis. And it wasn't really about the pandemic. And in fact, what we've seen, which is really, really encouraging from our point of view, is that since lockdowns ended and the kind of world opened up again, that need for, living in the moment, for kind of spontaneity and urgent need as we start to get back to much more complicated, busier lives, has just meant that Zapp has continued to grow, and really, convenience is having its moment post lockdowns.
It certainly is having its moment, because it's a very competitive market for what you're doing. So how are you surviving in this environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. At the end of the day, this is quite an old-fashioned business in the sense that I think what is going to win in this space is customer experience, right? Which is really being able to deliver on that customer promise. So in our case, our sort of top line promise is that we deliver within minutes. That's usually around 20 to 30 minutes max. We aim for 20 or less. And it's about consistently keeping that delivery promise, but also ensuring that you have the right catalogue, so the right product range to suit those spontaneity and urgent need use cases, and that you are able to ensure that what you have in stock is actually in stock. And then, then there's other aspects, obviously, the customer experience, having a great shopping experience on the app, etc., etc. But in the end, it just comes down to, let's say, pretty simple, which is within this space, it's going to be about customer experience, and the company that has the most consistent and high quality customer experience, I think, wins out. And in fact, like, an interesting data point is when someone comes onto Zapp and they make their first order, when that experience lives up to our promise or exceeds it, they automatically become the most loyal customers, and we see that. So it really does make a difference. If it's easier to order on Zapp than it is perhaps when you're super busy to go down to the shops yourself, then that's where we win.
So you're experiencing a kind of customer loyalty there. You're finding out that after the first order, they stay with you?
Yeah, to be, completely candid, in the early months, year of this space, there was a lot of competition, and we saw that some of our competitors were offering extremely generous discounts, right? Essentially, they were throwing money at people. And I think there was definitely going to be customers that were quite savvy and shopped around. We never really did a tremendous amount of that. Our vouchering was single-digit revenue compared to, we've heard, up to 20-30% revenue through discounts for some others in the space. And I think that was really smart on our part, if I dare say, because what it allowed us to do was to attract the right kind of customers from day one, and they were customers where they loved our product selection, they loved our customer promise, but most importantly, we were solving a genuine problem in their lives, which is letting them live in the moment and make the most of the moment. And I think that's paid off, because since some of that, that venture capital money is dried up and competitors are not throwing money at customers, we got the right kind of customers in the first place.
Yeah, your venture capital's not running out though, is it, Steve? You've got, what is it, $200 million worth at the start of 2022?
Yeah, we raised a decent Series B round. You're building genuine infrastructure, so there's capital cost to it that you can't really get around. So yeah, we are well capitalized. I think we've also been quite careful not to raise too much money before we've really proven out our thesis.
That kind of figure does show a confidence to investors, though. It shows that people think there are opportunities there. You got Lewis Hamilton involved. That must be exciting for Zapp as a brand.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely delighted to have Lewis partner with us. We have a range of great investors from various aspects of business, including sort of leading international venture capitalists and European venture capitalists who back our vision, which is really to transform convenience retail and build this new supply chain that eventually will be capable of delivering hundreds of millions of orders to millions and millions of customers around the world, getting them the things they need or want right now within minutes. But as you can imagine, that's a long-term journey, and to be able to do that more sustainably and more efficiently than any other existing supply chain today is a huge problem to solve. And really, our investors would say the same thing. We're just getting started. Yeah,
something I find interesting about what you guys are doing, which some others haven't, is that you link to specific areas like women's hygiene products. Does this kind of focus, does that help you retain customers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the way to think about it is your typical supermarket, probably stocks upwards of 30,000 SKUs, so 30,000 individual products, whereas our Zapp stores typically carry around 2,000 products. So what we have to spend our time, we obsess about this, is what are the products and the tastes and preferences of our customers for when they need or want something right now. Okay, and that obviously predominantly is things like drinks and snacks. So we have like an amazing wine selection, for example, and we stocked all sorts of sort of international brands for snacks and drinks, but also boutique and premium and sort of more local independent brands. And we're forever tweaking that catalogue in response to what sells and what our customers tell us they want more of. But also we have to be quite careful in terms of having that limited amount of shelf space, right? So the way we think about it is when there's a product, and I'll give you a fun example. Let's take ice cream, right? It turns out with ice cream, maybe it's not surprising, people want a lot of choice. People have their favorite flavors and their favorite brands, and we stock big brands like Ben and Jerry's down to sort of more local brands like Hackney Gelato. Whereas when you want something like a toothbrush in an emergency, we probably stock one toothbrush, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we think about it. When product choice is what customers want, we tend to go super deep and wide. And when it's something that's where you just need one in a hurry, then we have obviously less choice.
But can you expand out of the everyday grocery thing, or is that your niche, or are you looking at different products? What could Zapp sell?
So, as you say, we already recently launched a period store to target those type of products in a nice sort of presented, curated way, and try to really take the stigma out of periods. We've done all sorts of other stores. We've just launched Zapp Boutique, which is our premium and luxury store, where we're offering this highly curated and content-driven shopping experience within the main Zapp app. And that allows you to shop for some of your favourite premium and luxury brands. So we have Dalesford organic food products. I think we're going to stock around 90 of those. We've started selling more Apple products, even moving a little bit into tech when you need something really quickly. So really the way we think about it is, what kind of products do our customers need when they need or want something right now, and how does it either make the moment, because we're all about living in the moment and making more of life, or how does it save the moment when you occasionally need that emergency purchase, when you're willing to go on Zapp and pay for something to have it immediately.
Not all people are spontaneously buying an Apple product, for example, or are you now looking at sort of things like that? You come on this app to buy a big bag of crisps, but in a few days you might want to look what's over here. Is that kind of thing drawing people back, or is it still about looking at that and just getting it?
I think it adds some differentiation. If you're stocking products that you wouldn't typically find at your local convenience store, well, you wouldn't expect to, I think that adds a certain amount of stickiness. But it's also just, we're in the business of solving our customers' problems or freeing them up to live more in the moment. So we also sell, a range of sort of beauty products or self-care products. We're quite big on self-care Sundays, for example. But it really is, when you want to live in the moment, when you need that spontaneity and that urgent need, that is our absolute sweet spot. So when we deviate too far from that, it doesn't really work as well. It's definitely about solving that problem for our customers.
Okay, I need some ice cream and a bag of crisps, don't judge me. So while I order that, here are some ads. Why not keep yourself entertained by writing us a review on your podcast provider? We'll be back after these. I want to ask, if I may, a few questions about yourself, Steve. Before you worked at Zapp, you were a journalist. What made you go across to the dark side?
You're quite right. So I spent off and on 10, 15 years in journalism. Most recently, I was at a publication called TechCrunch, which sort of covers startups and the venture capital industry. And so during my final stint at that publication, it was 8.5 years. I spent 8.5 years obsessively covering UK and European startups, tech startups. I mean, I was called a tech reporter, but I really always thought of myself as a business reporter that happened to specialise in tech-enabled businesses. So, I wrote about some of the companies that your listeners will be very familiar with. So I think I was the first journalist to write about TransferWise, about the challenger bank Monzo. I'm pretty sure I was the first to write about Deliveroo, certainly in the tech business press. And also a whole lot of companies that didn't do quite as well as those that you won't have heard of. And so, seeing these startups go from being companies that no one really cares about, no one would have heard of, to making a real impact on the way we live and on society, it was obviously fascinating to have that kind of seat on the outside. But at some point, I knew I wanted to try my hand at something else. And in fact, I actually took a journalism break many, many years ago to do a startup of my own. So I'd already caught the startup bug once, and my recent move to Zap was just having another go at jumping into that adjacent industry. But yeah, so that's why I did it. But it was interesting because it was also partly a pandemic move, right? Lots of people, I think, during the pandemic sort of figured out their life-work balance, maybe what was really getting them interested and excited in work, and figured that now was the time to make a change. And that was certainly true with me. But also because I have a disability, I always preferred or needed to work from home. And so the pandemic sort of got rid of that old excuse that you can't be as productive working from home, and kind of opened up a lot of opportunities, certainly in terms of how I perceived them, because suddenly the world became that much flatter and I could go and work for any company because now no one really questions remote working.
Yeah, the listeners won't be able to see this, but you're a wheelchair user. Did that before now inhibit the opportunities for you? Could you have worked in your position now before remote working and Zoom and all the other things became a thing?
Yeah, no, it's something that I've asked myself. I think that the way I built my journalism career was I developed a phenomenal ability to network online and to get sources to trust me and build those key relationships you need as a journalist, almost entirely from my bedroom in a bungalow in North London, right? But whether I could then take that same approach to become, an executive at a tech company, especially one as, heavily invested in as Zap, was something that I perhaps didn't really think could happen pre-pandemic. So I'd often get tentative sort of job offers or explore opportunities. And as soon as I reached the subject around, like, is it possible to work from home most of the week, or if not entirely the entire week, some of those conversations dried up. So I think it did have a material difference, but most of all, more how I perceived opportunity. So once sort of work from home became, the new normal, even if it didn't exactly last, but it just removed that sort of age-old excuse, either in my head, in how I perceived opportunities, or in reality. And so, I genuinely believe that one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, and there weren't many, to be clear, it was a pretty miserable time. I was shielding, for over 2 years, but it definitely removed that glass ceiling, either in my head or quite literally. And I ended up joining Zap, and it was a great story because I was actually writing about Zap. I was going to break their initial funding round. So I remember calling up the Zap CEO and I'm like, hey, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to break your funding news. And then I was pushing for more details, and I said, look, you need to hurry up because I might not be at TechCrunch for that much longer. And he said, why? And I was like, well, I'm looking at a couple of opportunities. And he said, well, why don't you come and work for us? Well, what would I do? What does a journalist do at a speedy grocery company? And we got talking, we realised that we had so much in common in terms of how we saw the industry going and the opportunity. And well, as you say, the rest is history.
Yeah, and I guess you probably had a bit of insight into how people will want to use a service like Zap because of your own disability.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. And I know initially I felt it was product offering and an experience that I could relate to. During the lockdowns, I went deep in online grocery shopping, and also worked out this kind of idea that when you think about the grocery or the food industry as a whole, I could already see that different aspects of it were being picked off, and companies were offering to do one thing and do it really well. So in a sense, the sort of overall grocery shopping experience was being unbundled, right? So anything from kind of those meal kit delivery services where you order, the recipe kit and you kind of cook it at home, to something like Zap where it's about those spontaneous purchases. And I was already, during the pandemic, ordering organic meat from a specialist, and just seeing the way I say that the supermarket experience was being unbundled. and kind of digitized and brought online, and yet convenience retail seemed to be the one that was furthest behind, and therefore a huge opportunity for a company like Zapp.
I wonder how many talented people now have opportunities because of remote working. How much of the workforce is going to benefit from being able to pull these people in?
I think there is a real opportunity there. I think, as I say, from a personal point of view, it's going to be very difficult for any company hiring or any opportunity that might arise for myself personally if somebody then says, but your need to work from home is going to make you less productive, or any of those kind of old tropes. Because, yeah, the pandemic proved that it may not be ideal. It's not always better than in person. I think they have pros and cons, and I actually truly believe that hybrid working is probably the future. And certainly at Zapp, we're still a hybrid company. But in the end, for that kind of excuse that often people with disabilities are given, that it's somehow going to prohibit their productivity, I think that got kind of blown away right in one go. So in that sense, I think it's true. There's also an element in terms of startups and kind of some of these challenger companies, is hiring is always an issue. How do you hire talent, especially before you've established a brand? You know, how do you compete in the tech world with the Googles and the Facebooks and what have you? And certainly in London, in the old days, you used to always go up against the banks that used to hire often some of the best tech workers. And I think the great thing about remote working is now you can hire from anywhere, right? And that's definitely a win for access to talent. And yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
And just finally, is this your career now? Are you a tech entrepreneur? Or do you think you'll ever go back to the old-fashioned typewriter and start busting scoops out again? Is it done?
It's a really good question, because like it's one that people often ask me. But I have to say, in all seriousness, I think Zapp is probably the best job I've ever had. It's so exciting, it's so energizing to work with some of the amazing people at the company, and especially my own direct teams. You know, I get to directly and indirectly manage some amazing individuals. And so right now I'm really enjoying the energy. I think the company's mission is a long-term one. As I say, it's going to take years to really build out that new supply chain and be able to deliver products that people want or need more sustainably and more efficiently than any other existing supply chain today. And that's like a huge mission. So right now I'm definitely still loving being a tech executive and breaking that glass ceiling. But yeah, I mean, you never say never, right? Once you've got the journalism bug, and I always wanted to be a journalist since being a kid, right? So it was already a dream come true. But people switch careers more often than they ever did before. And yeah, absolutely loving this latest part of my story.
That was Steve O'Hear from Zapp. For more business interviews, news, analysis and commentary, go to standard.co.uk/business or pick up the Evening Standard newspaper. How to be a CEO will be back first thing Monday morning. I'll see you then.